Oh, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Caiwei Huang. I'm a junior in college and I study political science. What's the general impression so far? I've generally been at the climate generation this year, looking at different books, and it has been really great. It's a great place for networking because there's so many different actors, NGOs, schools that's been there, and there are also events. So I went to the ones that's related to what I'm researching on, which is China and decarbonization of its energy sector. But because there's so many actors and so many things to see, I also managed to see a lot of things that is not really related, but I in the end found it was really interesting. So they had an indigenous team day, and I met one of my friends, Clara. She's really interested in that. I followed her to a few events, and I found out a lot of the problems that indigenous people are facing, especially because they're the most vulnerable to climate change. So it was really great. It has been great so far. Yeah.
Great. Sam?
Okay. And I'm Sam Budnyk. I'm a junior in the college as well. I'm part of our culture group, and while the past couple of days I've been rather sick and hotel bound, part of what I've been doing has been going through the city and looking at some of the manifestations that the protest groups have put themselves into in light of the terrorist attacks and the state of emergency in which mass gatherings are no longer allowed. So ad campaigns buying out, I think, over 600 or 700 of these placards, as well as just a general presence in some of the more cosmopolitan parts of the city, with little reminders, as well as a multitude of Twitter campaigns, oddly enough. The city's really engaging with it, and it's been active in promoting the conference as a source of pride. And also, hopefully over these next couple of days, I'll be going to attend some of the art events that have been set up around the city, promoting some of the causes, or even just shedding light on some of the groups that are affected by climate change, particularly with rising sea levels.
Hi, my name is Jenny, and my major is in environmental sciences, and I'm a 4+1 student in the BS and MS program. So I'm in the science group. Basically, I'm attending the side events that Taiwan mentioned about, like in the climate generation area, listening to a couple seminars. And also, today I went to the La Gallery site. It's because today is like the Green Building Day, so we listen to a lot of seminars about like green building, how to build net carbon zero buildings. So it was really interesting to hear people like sharing their experiences, like what they have done and what's the target of them and how they can get to there. It's like the most impressive thing is like the money is there, but we just need to put the money in the right way. And also, it's really impressive to meet Mayor of Atlanta there. So we took a picture with him as well. But it was like really fun to hear all the mayors from different cities all around the world, how they attack this task and then what's their vision about green building. So I think more events that I will attend will be like that structure, but I will get more like incentives from these like great people.
Taylor?
Hi everyone, my name is Taylor McNair. I'm a senior in the business school and double major in environmental science. Here in Paris, I'm one of 2 students this week that actually has an accredited UN pass, so that gives me and the other one, Naomi, access to the actual conference site. So the conference site itself is like a pretty massive, sprawling complex. It's a converted airport, actually, in the north of France, and it basically consists of 6 different areas. So contrary to what most people think, most of the action is not going on in like the negotiation halls with country delegations and whatnot, largely because a lot of that is closed off and a lot of that is reserved for actual government officials or delegations or specific parties. But with that being said, there's thousands and thousands of things to do. It's a site essentially comprised of like 10, 20, 30,000 people at any given time. And just as many things to do, exhibits to visit, or side events. So I've mainly been focusing on a lot of the business, finance, private sector, and energy related talks. So a lot of that includes exploring talks or meeting people who are involved with climate finance policy, carbon pricing, carbon taxes, emission trading schemes, things like that, that all will directly come out of this Paris Agreement, but are sort of being discussed in different parts. So the actual negotiations themselves, some of them are open and some of them are closed. All in all, they're pretty tedious and kind of a not terrible to sit through, but they're tough for people that are following. So essentially what's going on is there's one text or one piece of document that's hundreds of pages long, and that's been worked on for the past year in separate sessions throughout the year. And what the role of these 180 some odd countries are for the next 2 weeks is to agree on every single word. So as you can imagine, going through those negotiations gets pretty drawn out, and long and complicated. So I've sat in on a few of the actual negotiations, and essentially what they do is each day or session is devoted to a different aspect of the text, or a different negotiating block, or a different specific topic, and they basically put the document on the screen and go paragraph by paragraph, debating what language should stay, what should be different, what should be added, what should be taken away. So, for example, I sat in on a negotiation where the delegations debated literally for 45 minutes about the use of starting a paragraph with "we welcome this" versus "we accept this," for example. So it's stuff like that becomes really monotonous and just kind of drags the process along. So the actual negotiations themselves can be really long and like not that stimulating. But the rest of the COP is extremely interactive. There's always things going on. We pretty much get to the site at like between 7 and 9 a.m. and usually don't leave before 8 p.m. except for today, obviously. And our schedules are usually packed. Depending on what's going on that day, like we'll usually get the privilege of seeing someone cool, someone special. Jenny alerted us today that Al Gore was speaking to the Chinese delegation, so we raced over and caught a quick glimpse of Al Gore. Yesterday we ran into the president of Honduras. We got a picture with Akon, he was there. So a lot of random, cool experiences, but it's sort of just speaks to what's going on at the conference itself. It's really like all-encompassing. There's so many different people involved, from private investors to NGOs to universities, and I mean, so far it's been a great experience. We have a lot more to cover, so we'll see what the next week has in store.
Questions? Any questions? No questions.
Mark, do you have any questions?
Do I have any questions? So many questions. What was the most exciting thing so far you've seen, or the most promising thing you've seen from any of you?
Well, I know at least for me, I was rather concerned about how, because so much what I had planned to do had been based around public gatherings, and that's something that's so completely forbidden right now. The night we arrived, actually, there had been a big clampdown, so there had been a protest, tear gas and everything, all the fun stuff. And it was so good to see that even after things had calmed down a bit there, the protesters and the police, they interacted peacefully for the most part. And the city's been very respectful, I think, of the foreigners in the city as well as of one another. And I think the ways they've been trying to express their opinions have been, for the most part, healthy and constructive and really encouraging. So I at least see that voices are not stifled here, even though there's that big fear of that.
I have a question or a comment. I really appreciated your descriptions of what's going on there. Taylor, thank you so much for giving us the overview. It's just a massive event, and even though I've been reading about this in the newspaper and I've been on your website, I didn't realize, how it was set up, or that it was set up at an abandoned airport. That's really impressive. I saw that you had, you've gone to hear Naomi Klein talk about an effort going on in Canada. Were any of you, which one of you was at that one? Could you talk about that one a bit?
Was there?
Did you guys hear that?
Yeah. None of us were there, but we did hear interesting stories about the event. Might not be too relevant.
Did we? So none of the four of us saw Naomi Klein speak. I guess because we sort of spread ourselves out across the entire city and conference. But apparently it was great.
I learned through your blog that she's with a group that's spearheading an effort in Canada toward more sustainable practices across the board, and that she's got a very big coalition she's working with.
Was that?
Yeah. So Naomi Klein is, for those that don't know, she's like an environmentalist, climate activist, and pretty important author. And she just wrote a pretty influential book that was basically a case against capitalism and for the climate, if you could say. And her big case study is Canada. And what she's done is built like this really impressive cohort of not just like Canadian government officials, but indigenous nations and minority groups throughout the region who are being directly impacted by climate change and have been a marginalized voice within their community for a really long time. So one of the things that she and a lot of other people are doing here, which has become a really big theme of the conference, is sort of the rights and responsibilities of these, often looked over indigenous or small nation islands. So some of the strongest voices at COP in Paris have been a lot of people that Naomi Klein is working with, which are, Canadian indigenous groups, Amazonian indigenous groups, sub-Saharan African nations, things like that, who have traditionally been marginalized in these talks, but are getting, a much stronger voice this time around.
Yeah, and especially with Obama, who said, I'm an island boy, so I guess they're getting better.
We have some questions.
Jay?
How does it feel to be a student at this conference and this event? Do you feel respected? Do you feel like you're interacting? Or do you just feel like a fly on the wall and no one's really noticing you?
So I have some problems with that because my research topic is focused on China, and China is more, there's a more hierarchical structure with regards to, meeting people. So when I did have the chance to meet a few higher officials from the National Development and Reform Council, and so they are the big council that does all the decisions with regards to energy, because it links to economics. So when I ask them questions, so they know that I'm for my appearance, as I think I'm young. So it was a little hard to get things out of them because, because of the hierarchy and seniority. But being a student here is great, actually. There are a lot of other students. Actually, yesterday we had a networking event with University of Connecticut, and we met more students who are here. And everyone's doing their different things. Stanford University is going to have another event, so we might be able to connect with them. So it has its ups and downs.
Yeah, I agree. It's actually a really timely question because every day that the COP has a theme, today's theme was Youth and Future Generation Day. So most of the side events and a lot of the speakers were focused on the youth and sort of the student movement and what their role in addressing climate change is. So one of the side events that I attended today was paneled by a group of student leaders and young leaders from across the world who were doing really interesting things in their own nations. And it's kind of interesting because it was the person who kicked off the talk was Cristina Figueres, who's the executive secretary of the UNFCCC, which is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the person that puts on this conference. So she gave the lead-off talk, and the room was packed with reporters and her staff and her security and students, obviously. And she gave her speech, took some pictures, and then took off. And the rest of the panel was devoted to hearing these stories of like young leaders throughout the world. And the first one to stand up was this woman from Canada. I think she was 17 or 18, and she was talking about her experience dealing with climate change impacts in her area. And the first thing she said was, our generation, has the responsibility to deal with, what our past generations have left for us, like the damage they've caused for us. And it's a little disheartening to see the executive secretary leave the panel before even listening to the students speak and the young leaders speak. So to that extent, I think some people feel a little marginalized and a little disenlightened with sort of the voice that we have. But there's definitely been an increased push to involve youth leaders and involve the young and involve students. And there's certainly no shortage of young people here. I mean, there's probably like 20 or 30 universities that have delegations. There's an entire NGO organization that's devoted to young organizers. And a lot of the people who are representing their own organizations are, the same age as us, 21, 22-year-olds.
So I guess how is what you learned so far, and I guess, building off what you just said about, the youth movement, how is it phrasing it?
Yeah, I think
Can you repeat that for those who said?
So how is what you've learned so far in respect to the youth movement, how has that really inspired you to, come back here and take action in like your own way?
Well, I think it's kind of made me reevaluate what is an actual fruitful way of reaching out. All of these
To call them back.
Turn off the video?
Yeah,
Yeah, why don't you try to
we're
turn
gonna
off
try,
the video?
or we can try and just,
Hey, what's up?
Okay, do you want to relay that question?
Asking, looking at some of the youth movements, how has that energized you to come back to Emory and further the cause? Is that right, Morgan?
Mm-hmm.
In the city, there have been many of these small little photo op kind of things set up that really came across as gimmicky at first and would really not have been something I would have thought of as a value at all. But those little things, the lighthearted things, that really bring groups of people together. For instance, on the Champs-Élysées, they have a big Christmas fair right now. And they have all of these posts set up where people can pedal to generate electricity to power it. And little things like that have tons and tons of people lined up to participate in them, even though I would have written them off as silly. I think trying to find ways to engage in the community that are fun and light, not necessarily policy or science heavy, can really raise awareness in terms of this is an issue that people put value in, and it doesn't bombard people with too much information that would turn them off from the issue.
Yeah, and I just saw yesterday on the internet about this installation with a polar bear stuck on a stick, and the installation is called Unbearable. So I thought that was pretty cool, and it gets the message straight across. So I mean, things like that to put in Emory and just raising people's awareness. And also yesterday we were at the networking. Maybe this is not so much that can be done by students, but one of the professors was saying how university should then prepare students for jobs that is going to be there in the future for us, that is related to combating climate change. That it will be preparing students for this kind of future, and then academically what to do with it. So that's also another area maybe.
And also, like, Professor Saikawa and I was like in the Gary area. We have like different booths from different business, and they offer solutions like to greener energy and greener buildings. So we went there and we found out a business that is doing nitrous fixing for the fertilizer. They're doing really like impressive work on produce instead of fertilizer, but doing the bio stuff to nitrous fixing to the soil. So I think like they have talked about like negotiations, didn't really mention about the nitrous come from the soil, how big a problem is there. But there are some like business there are going to like solve this problem by themselves. So I think it's more like connections, and also what we learn from COP we can bring back to Emory, like do more research and like connections, and then we can research further with that.
Yeah, I think the inspiring thing is that, so people estimate that there's something like 40,000 people coming to Paris this week for COP, and only like 150, maybe 200 of those people are actually in COP, signing an agreement and making and negotiating. The 39,000 other people are here for different reasons, and they're all to impact climate change in some way. So it's just it's definitely inspiring to see different people passionate about different things, all for sort of the same end goal. And so, like yesterday, I was in a side event where one of the panelists was saying how she was a lead negotiator for the Costa Rican delegation for like the past 10 years, and she was like, "There's a reason I'm not in that negotiating room anymore. There's a reason I'm sitting in front of you, and it's because the answers are no longer going to come out of that piece of document. They're going to come from the people in this room, and they're going to come from the people in this exhibit hall." So it's definitely inspiring to see that it's not just what agreement comes out of COP. It's sort of everything else that happens on the peripheries that's going to make an impact.
Since this is kind of a world effort, all going centered around Paris, being American students or coming from an American university, how do you feel your general impression is of the event that's going on, and what are their general impressions of you guys?
I know at least a couple of our peers, including Adam Goldstein, who went to a climate simulation where they participated in a simulation based upon computer models to just measure the effect of an imaginary form of negotiations to see exactly what might be a reasonable expectation and a reasonable result from this conference on the various nations of the world. And he, fluent French speaker, speaking with people there, he got the impression that people were generally fine with being with us being Americans, and that there was a slight tendency to put a little more blame on us because we are such big carbon emitters. But it really seemed the biggest source of concern was Donald Trump, so it's not too big of an issue here. I think everyone's been respected, and I don't really think that plays into much here.
Yeah, I would probably agree. I mean, it's nothing Americans shy away from here. Like, people are still proud to say where they're from. I mean, I definitely think Americans are less proud than, like, the island of Kiribati, who, like, goes around parading about where they're from. But I mean, I still think we still, like, garner a pretty good level of respect, and a lot of that is because of what Obama has said recently and sort of like the statements he's made at the beginning of COP, and kind of the work that Americans have done in this space over the last year. But beyond that, I mean, yeah, Americans will always be Americans. Like, people are always going to make fun of them in some form. But I don't really feel undermined as an American.
So I'm not an American, so I cannot answer this question. But I think this will be a very interesting question to watch next week when the results of the negotiations actually coming out. Because from what I observe from the American side, at least John Kerry has said that America is not going to accept a legally binding agreement. And of course, with whatever that's happening in Congress, that's going to be very hard. And so Obama's in this place where he has to sort of live up to his international image of pro-climate change and trying to do something and balancing out what he can actually do with a Congress that does not support him. And of course, on the Chinese side, we are doing a lot of things that's trying to align with the developing countries. So we're not actually going to contribute to the Green Climate Fund. We're going to have our own fund. So there are going to be some divisions, differences that's going to come out in the second week. So this will be a question that we'll have more answers next week, and it will be. I think this is going to be a very interesting question to watch out for.
So I understand that there are no public gatherings right now, but I was wondering if you've witnessed any form of protesting or climate skeptics that are present and what the impact of that has been.
Oh, climate skeptics, I don't know if they exist in Europe, but we've definitely seen, on our first night here, there was a fairly big protest at La Place de la République, which is in central Paris, and that was a pretty big gathering. As we were arriving to our hotel earlier in the day, we were greeted with news reports on the TV of the police tear gassing protesters, herding them off. It was intense to watch because it was similar to some of the things we'd seen in the U.S. But it seemed that it calmed down a good bit, and in the evening, as we happened to be going through the city, we stopped by, and there were still hundreds of protesters there, as well as dozens upon dozens of police vehicles, police officers there, and it seemed to be going along fairly well. There was chants and songs being passed around, but it was fairly minor. I think for the most part, since then, there has not been much in the way of protest because of that prohibition on public gatherings. A number of groups, as I said earlier, have purchased ads in place of that because there were tons of events planned, tons of marches, tons of just in general outdoor gatherings planned that are now completely against the rules. So they were just dropped off the schedule, and I think most groups have been scrambling to find an offensive way to still follow through. I know a couple actually reorganized. They'd be hosting things at various universities of Paris, indoors, so as to avoid that. But I think as far as street presence goes, it's been pretty quiet here.
Yeah, I know that Clara, another classmate, she found out like a gathering place, like a warehouse where a few different groups of protesters has been going there to organize events at night. So maybe we'll ask her to blog about it, and then you can watch it, find it on our blog.
Yeah, there's actually an activist space in the conference center in the actual COP. And there's been like a couple protests each day. There's a group of organizers who have been fasting once a month, every month for the past 2 years. So they've been having, I think it's called Fast for the Climate or something like that. But so they've been having like really public fasts, I guess, in the middle of the conference. Today, because it was Youth Day, there was a youth die-in. So like hundreds of young people kind of like sat down in the middle of the conference. So there's been small stuff like that, and at least within the COP, it's well contained and not really illegal, so it sort of comes and goes, but nothing like on the scale like it was projected to be within Paris.
We talked about like the impressions of like Americans and like their initiatives. You guys have been exposed to so many representatives from around the world. Are there specific countries or regions that have really impressed you with their initiatives, or?
What was the last part?
Are there specific countries or like around the world who have really impressed you with their initiatives?
I guess from the first couple of days of negotiations, like some of the more outspoken or like really progressive nations have been like some of the more forgotten in the past. So there's a delegation that includes all the small island nations. So it's a cohort of like Pacific Island nations, like small islands off the coast of like in the Caribbean, off the coast of South America. It's a delegation of like 40 countries, and they've come out in support of, even though they haven't contributed anything to this cause really, they've come out in support of things like 100% renewable energy by 2050, like legally binding stipulations, loss and damage payments for like adaptation measures or damage that will occur due to climate change. So I think like a success story that will come out of COP will be how influential the indigenous nations and the small island nations will be. Beyond that, I mean, leading up to COP, like China and the US have both said really impressive things. We'll see what happens as they play out.
I can tell you that it's not going to pay off, but from past experiences.
Yeah.
But I know that India has announced a huge investment into, I think it was solar energy or some huge renewable energy investment, and that's pretty impressive as a developing countries. But I agree with Taylor with the indigenous people. They are really making their voices heard in this COP, and I'm just really hoping that something come out for them, since they are the most vulnerable and the most affected.
I think Chinese people are more emphasized during the panel discussion. They're all asking about China's the biggest developing country, so they're facing really challenges with the development that we're facing too, and also how to solve the climate change problem with that huge development. Like the buildings today, they're saying 40% of the buildings are going to build in few decades, or of the whole world buildings are going to be built in China. So I think they're more emphasized what China is going to do facing climate change. And I also think the China officials also really want to call for communication, want to call for cooperations, and also brought some really good words out, what they have done and they are going to be done in by 2020 or by 2030. So I think with the emphasis to China and also developing countries, I think there are more going on negotiations for these countries, not only Europe and America.
Maybe I should clarify that. I just think that the U.S.-China cooperation is not going to pay out based on the history of how they always have this on-state visits. But that being said, I agree with Jenny that China is going to play a lot more huge roles, just that maybe not cooperating in the same way as the developing countries, as in the developed countries. So we're going to have our own South-South cooperation fund. And then, but I also did talk to a few people, the officials, and they were saying that because of all the environmental problems that China is facing, the central government is really trying to push for changes in investments in renewable energy. So yeah, we're definitely going to be a huge player, and maybe not just in the same way.
So you mentioned the news media reports, and since this is a media studies class, would you talk a little bit about what you've observed about news media coverage of the event? How do they cover it? Maybe how don't they cover it? Some shortfalls. And then just talk generally about social media and how those channels are open to groups in ways now that they hadn't been, say, 20 years ago when these negotiations started.
Well, I know for me, because I really have been stuck up in the hotel room for the past 2 days. It's been kind of miserable. I've been cooped up with my Washington Post and New York Times and Fox News and all the other wonderful sources of media we have. So much of the attention has not really been on the climate negotiations. There's been a bit more attention today in that, I believe it was today, the Republicans said, well, we're just not going to be passing anything. Jeb Bush said, oh, I wouldn't have done what Obama did. I just wouldn't have gone. We don't need to give it any additional credence. And I think almost all the coverage is hinged on little flashpoints. There have been bold claims by Obama get attention. Obama speaking to Putin about Syria got attention. But there's been so very little on any of the actual environmental cause focused on here. And I think when you look at coverage that does concern itself with that, there are a number of NPR pieces as well as New York Times, I think, is doing a series each day of answering a simple climate question or a complicated climate question in a simple way. Those have gotten a little more tangible, but their recurring theme is probably not too much is going to happen, although there's a chance that it will from this. It's a very limited coverage of the event itself, or at least from what I've seen. Maybe my peers have seen something different.
I guess from like an inside perspective, within the COP, we've kind of experienced over the past couple days, the negotiation sessions get more and more closed off as you get closer to the end of 2 weeks. And that's kind of the experience we've heard from people who have been at past COPs that we've met. From a social media standpoint and from a less like government standpoint or official standpoint, I would say media coverage is like widespread and well developed. I mean, most of the things that are going on inside events and exhibits are like rely on hashtags, rely on Twitter-driven campaigns, things like that. Some random people have picked up our tweet. Yeah, you guys should follow us on Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat. Some very random organizations have picked up our tweets, including the U.S. Center that's at the exhibit halls in COP, and people like that. So from that sense, the media has been covering some of the more like nuanced aspects of COP, but within the negotiations, it's really hard to get a lot of information out, largely because most of the important talks get closed off or closed to just delegations. Even the ones that I've been in, they don't let you take, they like cover your cameras if you take them out, they don't let you take pictures, stuff like that. There's what I've learned over the past few days is there's like these cohorts of groups that kind of like spread themselves really wide and leverage every possible connection they make, and then they meet up at the end of the day and share information about what's gone on in the actual negotiations, and they write releases. So there's a big organization called Climate Action Network, and you have to be accepted into the organization, but basically they have connections in every aspect of COP. They have people in delegations in other countries, in certain NGOs and like multilateral banks that get access to the negotiations, and they come back for a press briefing at like 4:30 or 6. Like me, Naomi, and I, who are in the conference, tried to get into the CAN meeting today, and it wouldn't let us come in. So they definitely they definitely try to keep everything tight. And even for the people negotiating, they don't want rumors to fly, which they will, but they try to keep what's going on in the text, or at least the important parts, as locked up as possible for a while.
I've been at the climate generation area, which is the area that's open to public and has a lot of exhibitions going on. So there's huge cameras and dozens of reporters everywhere. So reporting on each booth and what's happening. But I also observed that sometimes the reporters haven't really done their homework and doesn't know what's going on. So this person from the Brazilian TV approached me and asked me about what's China's contribution on the North-South cooperation, and my answer was China's not in the North-South cooperation. And she was going on with these questions, but we're just not in it. So that's one, and also with regards to public attention, as in how public is watching the issue. I think it's quite kind of low in the sense that even the COP21's official account, Twitter account, their posts get some of the posts only get 2 or 3 retweets, and that's about it. And then I was also trying to get a media pass from the Chinese state media, and then one of the editors was telling me that there hasn't been much attention on this COP. So yeah, yeah.
With that being said, everyone else in the public is pretty vocal. I think the first day of COP had 1 million COP-related tweets, or the COP21 hashtag, and they've been going up ever since. But those are just normal people, not necessarily media agencies.
And one last thing I would like to add to that is international media has been covering it very differently. Some German papers, such as Die Zeit, have been doing a very good job of getting into the nitty-gritty technical details, but I just don't know that in our American media space we've had much of a space for any of that kind of discussion. I don't think there's much of a market for it in widely consumed news media.
That's really interesting, your reflections on the role of the media. I'm just wondering, you all were involved in a course, a semester-long course, really to give you a lot of information and to educate you and to kind of get you ready for this trip. So could you address that a little bit about how it felt, how you feel prepared, how maybe you felt surprised once you got there about the actual conditions that are there?
I don't have a personal story, but this is a problem story I heard from Naomi. So before we came, one of our huge projects was to do a podcast on some topic related to climate change. And Naomi was saying that she was talking to one of the people who was working on agriculture, and then the person just dropped the term that she only knew because she did the podcast, and the person who interviewed in the podcast used the same term, and that's why she knew about it. So in terms of information and knowledge, the podcast really helped, and we had a really interesting podcast as well. If you want to share?
Yeah, I would agree. A lot of the projects and the stuff that we did leading up to COP, I think really prepared us well for some of the stuff we'd be talking about and seeing. I think nothing could have prepared us for the actual experience. It's been beyond overwhelming, the amount of stuff that's going on, the amount of people that are here, the amount of topics and information that's being covered. So I think we did a really good job of exploring and preparing ourselves for what we thought could come. But I think the conference itself is just beyond, unless you've been there before, you really don't know what to expect. We even had Emory alums or people at Emory who had been at past COPs come and tell us about their experiences, and it still doesn't even prepare you for what's actually going on during the conference or what's going on during the city.
And I think much of the information, there are things I've been exposed to before, but I think it was really helpful for us to get the basic scientific background, particularly for someone like me who does not have a science background, to be able to understand these issues better. And I think it really fleshed out, to me personally at least, how, well, not necessarily unrealistic, but how challenging it is for any hope of an agreement to be coming out of this. But one has to be optimistic.
me with the science background, I'm basically doing research in air quality. So I know a lot of stuff from air, but with like different topics of each day, I get into different topics of science and really dense like data and also like results from that topic is given to me. So I think the course give me really like broad background of each sort of topics, but like in COP, it's like Taylor said, it's really overwhelming, like all the stuff really dense and you know more than you like you saw. So
And I think on Saturday, aren't you meeting Emory alumni group there?
Yeah.
Yeah, this weekend, right?
I think we have one more question.
I was gonna say, how do you guys plan to share your experience with the rest of the Emory community aside from your website and Skype calls like this?
Well, we've all got a little bit more work to do there, but it's something that we're very actively picking up while we're here in the city, because we really do want to bring the awareness and the engagement that we witnessed here back home, because we really think it can make a difference. And I know some groups have begun some projects, like someone's actually doing a Humans of Cope, which should be an interesting project. So we've got a couple nice cameras here with us helping with that. And I'm going to be excited to see what all we actually bring in the spring semester, but we do have plans to be putting together a climate week and things like that next semester that we hope will make an impact on campus and to our student body.
Yeah, we've been talking about a few things, a few initiatives, but I think this is something that we actually need your help. Like, what will best appeal to you guys, and then if you guys are following our website or Twitter, and then tweet us something that you think, oh my God, this is really interesting that the Emory community will like, and can you bring it back to us, and then that will be really helpful.
and also you can interact with us, like which question that is really you want the answer from COP21, and what updates that you want to hear from us. Like we can do like more Twitter and also like interactions between you guys and
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, folks.
Always on Snapchat. Our snaps are great.
Emory is in Paris.
Yeah.
Emory in Paris.
Emory in Paris. It's really good.
Yeah. So thanks very much, especially to Sam for rising from your sick bed to speak to the class today. Appreciate it. Have a great experience. We'll look forward to reading more on the website.
Thanks, Sheila.
Take care.
Bye, Tara.
Whoa, Taylor. Where's my shout out?
Bye again.